what we're seeing from day one. I mean, the ink, the confetti on the streets, the empty streets on his inauguration day hadn't even been swept up, and he was already instituting elements of Project 2025. And when you look at elements of Project 2025, it really, I'm paraphrasing, is to dismantle higher education. And so there is that fear because people who know the history, whether it's taking, a federal grant for this or this or that, he's trying to insert himself on everything, anything higher education, and ultimately trying to narrow it down so that people who look like me, people who look like so many other people may not be able to have an education.
All righty. Welcome in Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
I'm going to tell you the way that we can make some money, David, is if we charged and allowed people to listen for a fee to the shit that we say, that we choose. I mean, you hear about the crazy stuff that comes out of our mouth that we say while we're recording. So you can only imagine what we cut. But yeah, it's it's always a good fun time, and especially for us. And that's what's most important here is that we're enjoying it. Because if we weren't, we'd stop doing this. All right, listen, welcome in. Before we get rolling here on this fine podcast of Alabama Politics This Week, I need to tell you about our friends over at Wind Creek Entertainment who help make this thing go around. It is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment, and we really appreciate what they do, which is just help make this show go round, and that's it. They ask for nothing else, and we appreciate them. And what they do for the state is just as awesome, or more awesome actually, because they are the state's largest hospitality employer. They operate 3 fantastic casino resorts in the state. The Porch Creeks themselves operate many hotels around the state and around the country. They are first-class employers. They bring a lot of tax dollars and a lot of revenue back to this state. They employ a ton of people. They've changed a lot of lives for the better. Some of the stuff that they've been able to do with their educational services for the tribal members and for the folks just in the surrounding communities has been outstanding. It seems like we're running stuff constantly now about their, the giving that they do to the different school systems and the different programs and police departments and fire departments and, helping with waterworks and just opening this business and that business. And it's just, it seems like they're constantly moving and doing good things. And we really appreciate what they do for us and what they do for the state. And we would encourage you, it's going to be football season. This Saturday is the unofficial opening. I think this week 0 is what they call it. Got a handful of games, and then next week is week 1. So everybody's starting to get in those game mode to travel. I know ASU's got a big game on Thursday night at UAB. So that's where they're opening 2 state schools going there on Thursday night, and Auburn's at Baylor, Alabama. I don't know if they're fielding the team this year, but they'll probably do something. And so I saw where Michigan got in trouble from the NCAA. I was like, couldn't you do something to Alabama too? I mean, just for general purposes. Surely to God they've done something. But it's and also saw where Auburn claimed some national championships.
Yeah, clearly we know who your team is. Clearly,
not me, unbiased, neutral observer. But I'm not, though, when it comes to the Wind Creek folks. We really do appreciate them and really, really do appreciate what they do. Check them out online at Wind Creek Entertainment. Just Google it up. Book a stay, break up the trip to the games, go there, have a good time, take the family. There's something to do for everybody. You will not regret it. And we really, really encourage you to do that. All right. So you're going to be shocked by this. There was trouble with the Alabama Democratic Party and the DNC this past week. The DNC invalidated yet another election of officers. This was for DNC members from Alabama, in which there had been a long line of just nonsense, really. There had just been a long line of nonsense. And they invalidated that election of Joe M. Reed, who is Joe Reed's son, Stephen's brother. There was another lady and another gentleman who was also in that. Donna Foster was the lady. The gentleman who was part of that, they determined, I believe, that his election was won by so many votes that disqualifying that particular election would not have made any difference in it, that he was clearly a choice of the people, and so he was going to remain. And so they invalidated the two, Foster and Reed, and they're going to have to hold new elections. look, here's my problem. Okay.
All right.
There's going to be, I know this. Joey Reid has blown up my phone over the last 2 days. Okay, calling me to try to tell his side of the story, which I was fine to do. I was just in a meeting when he called the first time. I tried to call him back. He didn't answer. Tried to call him back again. He didn't answer. And so then he called back at 7:30 last night. And I was like, no, I was on a bike ride with my daughter, and I'm not answering your call. So anyway. Here's my problem. It's always something,
Mm-hmm.
Look at this line of things that went on with this. Okay. So let me just explain this whole thing, this thing that I had to go back and look into to see what exactly happened. All right. You had DNC members from Alabama who were there already in place. All right. But
yeah.
Randy Kelley and whoever else is involved in this determined that they wanted to make the election of DNC members from the state of Alabama coincide with the DNC convention. So they wanted to change what was the normal pattern of election, which would have reduced the current folks' service by a year if they did not get reelected. So they wanted to simultaneously hold elections for the new seats and change the bylaws in order to have the elections move backwards to this time. So apparently other people did not want this. So you had two people who were in place, and Caroline Self, Josh Coleman, who were already there. That's who Reid and Foster took the place of. So they wanted to do this, and they wanted to have these elections go down. And so in June of 2024, they scheduled a meeting. They didn't have a quorum. Not enough people showed up to the meeting. So then in July, they said, well, we're gonna make this thing happen. So we're gonna do a mail-in election. And so they allegedly sent ballots out to all the executive committee members. Okay. They claimed
why do you say allegedly? Why do you say allegedly?
Because a lot of the executive committee members say they never received a ballot or notification that they were going to do this. And so they had no idea that this was going to happen. They said. So lo and behold, when these ballots are allegedly returned and allegedly counted, that Joe Reid and this Foster lady, they win, and Coleman and Caroline Self are out. Well, everybody kind of pitches a fit about this. They claim that it was a poor, the people didn't get their ballots and all this. So they decide not to do anything with that election. So then they decide they're going to hold another one. This one is in October. Again, they fail to reach a quorum to hold it. So at this point, Randy Kelley decides that, well, now it's in the discretion of the chair to go and because according to the bylaws, he has the authority to fill vacant seats, except they're not vacant. They're not vacant seats. And so he just replaces these folks with the people he wants to have put in there who were running for this. And then there's a challenge that's presented to the DNC. They go up to the DNC. I believe it's in January when they went to the DNC. And the DNC says,
who presented the challenge?
This was Self and Coleman. They challenged, and Ralph Young was their representative at the challenge. And at the challenge, the DNC people say, okay, look, we're going to allow this to go forward for the time being, as long as you follow through with what you say and hold a fair election in April, like you claim you're going to do. So they come back and they hold the election in April, and it's another show of there's a certain term that's there, and I'm trying not to cuss today too much, but it's another one. We'll see how this goes, because the right wing nut is going to be Trump, and I'm going to blow it. I know when I start talking about it. So,
right.
So there are more irregularities. There are people that weren't members that were allowed to vote, allegedly. There were, but they took, and so then this was challenged. And so they took this to the DNC, and the DNC looked at all of it and was like, what? The gentleman from, let me see exactly where he was from, because I want to make sure I get this right. Let's see, New Hampshire State Chairman Raymond Buckley says, I have been a state party chair for 48 years. There are 57 state parties in the DNC, and do you know the one party that just keeps on coming back? Alabama. And he expressed disgust and heartbreak Heartbreak. Said he was heartbroken over the way that these things have been conducted. And that's what I'm saying is everybody is tired of this. Just why can't you hold an election and let who wins? Just hold a fair election. Do it the right way. Follow the rules. Send out the right things to people. You know what's supposed to be done. Why can't we just do this? Why can't we do this?
Okay, so I got a few things.
Okay, go
ahead. The first is a question, and you may or may not have the answer. I don't know, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So why is it that this ruling from the DNC? Why is it happening now? Why did it just occur? Do you know what the reason is for the timing? Why didn't
I believe
it happen sooner?
it just had to do with the fact that when the challenge was filed and the next time that they could have the hearing and stuff.
Okay. All right.
So they challenged the thing after April, and I believe this was the first meeting that they had in which the credentials committee could hear everything.
Got it. Okay. So sort of committee schedules and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay. So the allegation that I'm hearing in what you're saying is that the leaders of the Democratic Party in Alabama did something that was fraudulent. That's what I'm hearing. Is that the allegation?
Yeah, I believe that's a fair thing to say. I believe that they have repeatedly refused to follow the norms and proper procedures of the election process. In this, they have done it time and time and time again, and that is what continues to cause them trouble whenever this is taken to the DNC. And it's not just me saying it; it's the people on the credentials committee saying it.
Yeah,
and it's the people at the leadership of the DNC. And this is the other thing. One last thing I just want to say: it can't be that everybody is against you. Okay, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That everybody is just out to get Joe Reed and Randy Kelley. You know what I mean? That can't be the case. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is you're saying that they purported to do something, send out the mail-in ballots that they're being accused of not doing. Mm-hmm. And then they're saying that they counted all the mail-in ballots that they say they sent out, and that the result was a certain thing that favored certain people. But because it's alleged that they didn't even send out all the ballots that they say they did, they couldn't have possibly come to the conclusion that they came to unless there was some lying or some deception and some fraud.
I think they pretty well admitted by holding another election shortly after that. Because they held they scheduled another election in October.
Right. Okay.
That election that they tried to hold by mail in July was fatally flawed.
Okay.
To the point that they did, as far as I know, and according to the record that I read from the DNC meeting in the credential committee, the meeting that I watched, they did not even attempt to justify that. As far as I can tell, they did not hold that election up as any example of anything.
Okay. Well, here's my take. I'm going to speak now as the average Alabama Democratic voter.
Okay.
So I'm the average Alabama Democratic voter. I read the news that once again there's some kind of dispute and some serious allegations coming from the Democratic National Committee related to the Alabama Democratic Party and its leaders.
Yes.
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is happening again?
Yeah, right.
So, and the thing that irritates me, as the average voter, speaking as an average voter, is, and we're in an election cycle. So this is a time where our focus needs to be on building a strong infrastructure to get out the vote and raising money and figuring out which candidates are going to, making sure we've got a field of candidates, first of all, so that we don't have empty ballots or empty slots and ballots, and then that the best candidates emerge on the Democratic side to challenge Republicans in the general election. in less than a year, we're going to be, next May, we're going to be in a primary. And that's going to happen quickly. It's going to happen before people realize.
Yeah.
So to me, this is another strange, ridiculous distraction. And it's another fight that, it seems to me, detracts from where our focus needs to be and exhausts resources that we don't need to be deploying for another fight with the DNC, that we need to be deploying to move the state party forward and positioning it for the primaries and then the general election. So as the average Democratic voter in the state of Alabama, I'm like, what are we doing now? Why are we at this place again? I feel like the guy that you quoted in your story, Josh. It's like, why does this keep happening?
Yeah.
Why is it that it's Alabama that continues to be in some kind of protracted fight with the DNC? No other state, and if you want to say it's if you want to couch it in a historic civil rights context or something, well, what about Mississippi?
Yeah.
What about Tennessee?
Yeah.
They're not fighting with the DNC.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's what I'm
Georgia.
saying, though. I mean, yeah. I mean, but that's kind of my point as well. I mean, why is it always something? Why can we not just hold an election? I mean, why can't you just take what the DNC tells you to do? Because let's be honest, the DNC is not interested in who wins or loses in this state. They don't care. They don't care if Joe Reed is the party chairman. They don't care if Randy Kelley is the party chairman. They don't care if Joe Reed's son is a DNC member. They don't care. But what they do care is that you follow these steps and you do things appropriately, and you don't disqualify people. You don't, kill off caucuses, and you give people a fair shot. You don't overburden some people. You don't disenfranchise certain voters. You don't allow non-members to vote. That you follow the process. That's what they care about. And that this continues to happen over and over and over again. I mean, this is such, you're right. This is such a nothing thing. You're just elected. Nobody even, who are the Republican members from Alabama?
Who knows?
They ain't no damn idea. I didn't even know Caroline Self and Josh Coleman were the DNC members. So, so that's what I'm saying. It's such a nothing for almost every person out there. And yet now you've turned it into something by doing this screwed up shit. Because the screwed up stuff.
It's just one more thing that creates chaos and conflict in our party and puts us at odds with the national party when right now the national party, we need the national party.
Yes.
We need the national party as much as we've ever needed them.
Yeah,
so, I'm not saying the National Party is perfect. I'm not saying they've done, because I've had issues with the National Party myself. But I'm saying, we need to figure out a way to work with the National Party so that we can begin to move forward. As long as we're at odds with the National Party, I don't see how we ever get to a point where we can be a productive party in this state. It's enough that we're fighting the Republicans. And the Republican, when we don't have control of the legislature, we don't have control of the governor's mansion. We haven't for over 20 years. And now we're in these, protracted on again, off again fight with our own party, our own national party. How does that make sense?
It doesn't, man. And it never has, and it never will. And it just, again, I just don't understand what the benefit is to anyone especially currently. I don't understand what the benefit is relative to what you're doing in being in control of the Alabama Democratic Party. Okay. I don't, you know what I'm saying? So what? I mean, Randy Kelley's in control of the party. So, I mean, it's like saying I'm the captain of the Titanic. You know what I mean? It's not at this point. And I know that's a cliched line that's been used over and over, but I mean, it really is. There's no, as far as I can tell, it's just a title, for right now. And until you build this party up to where it's actually challenging again and a viable second party in the state, being the chairman of the party doesn't make a damn. I mean, it doesn't matter to anybody.
No, I think you make an excellent point. I mean, that really is something that I think, and I got a lot of respect for Reverend Dr. Kelley and Joe Reed, Dr. Reed, but I got to tell you, man, I mean, I think you're making an excellent point. Being the chair of something that's losing repeatedly and can't move forward has zero prestige.
Yeah.
It has zero impact, really. I mean, you whatever bragging rights you get are minuscule compared to what you could have if you were winning and what the opposite party has.
Yeah.
So I think you make an excellent point. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me, and this may sound strange at first, so give me a second to kind of hear me out. This reminds me of church. It reminds me of situations where people and I've been a church guy all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was born into a church, baptized in a church, been a steady member of a church all my life. And what I've noticed with church people, not just in my church, but in other churches too, is there sometimes is a faction of people who are so concerned about being theologically correct or theologically right about something, that they don't see that they're ruining relationships. They don't see that they are undercutting their own mission because of their obsession with being right.
Yeah.
And this is what this feels like to me. It feels like that kind of situation.
I would say, I think I would put it a little differently because I do agree with what you're saying. But I think it would, it reminds me of some of those church fights where, one party, one side goes one way and one goes the other because somebody wanted to be in control and wasn't given enough power, and that they wanted to do things this way and they thought they ought to do things this way. And so they start trying to control the deacon board and all, you know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing that it kind of seems like it's a power situation. And you're right. Listen,
I think you're right when you say it's a power situation, but the reason I was focusing on the right thing is because if you think about things the Reverend Dr. Kelley especially has said on our show in the past, he's very fixed. I'm gonna say it. He's very fixated, I think, on the historical injustices that have occurred in the Democratic Party. And I don't dispute it. I think he's right about that. I think historically the Democratic Party has treated black people in a way that they should not have, just as Alabama has as a state, just as America has as a country. I don't dispute any of that. But I think at a certain point, and then we know, of course, about his allegations, calling Doug Jones a racist and other stuff, but I think at a certain point, you have to try to figure out, how do we, the past is the past. We don't forget the past because if you forget the past, you're doomed to repeat it. But at the same time, you got to figure out how do we remember the past and use the past as a way to productively, constructively move forward, and what is it as a party that we need the most right now, despite, whatever past indignities or injustices have occurred, and we have every right to call those things out. But how do we move forward today? And how do we make progress today in the most constructive way? And if there's things that need to be called out today, and I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't, but if there are things that need to be called out today, what's the most constructive, productive way to do it so that the party can move forward and be viable in the state of Alabama? I don't think that that's really it feels to me like that's not at the top of people's minds. How do we make the party viable? What seems to be at the top of people's minds is, we're right about X, Y, and Z, and they're wrong. And so we're just going to continue to do things the way we've been doing them because we think they're wrong. And what does that get us? It hasn't gotten us anything.
No, and I think instead of using the past as a means to kind of bring things together and bridge the gap or whatever, it has been used in as an excuse often to do whatever the hell they wanted to do. It has been, I think often when we've had Randy Kelley on here, and I've said it to him personally and the numerous times, that whenever it seems like somebody says, hey, we're going to have, that you can't do that. You've done this the wrong, whether it be qualifying the caucuses and all this stuff. It seems the fallback line is somebody who's challenging them on this is a racist, this is the white minority trying to get control back. This is Doug Jones. This is Tabitha Eisner. This is whoever that they want. And so that race issue has been used as a wedge to divide the people and make it seem as though that what they're doing is in the best interest a lot of times, when it's clearly not. And like in this case here, as far as I know, no one has mentioned any race, although he did say some pretty pointed things. Randy Kelley did say some pretty pointed things about Ralph Young, calling him a crybaby during the meeting and whatnot. But for a neutral observer just watching this and looking at it, I mean, I think just if you just took an average person who wasn't around here, wasn't into politics, and you showed him what's happening on both sides, I think that person would just simply say, well, why didn't you follow the rules? I mean, it's that simple. Why didn't you just follow the rules and do what you're supposed to do and let the chips fall where they may? And whoever gets elected, and whoever doesn't, goes back into the party, and you continue to work together, because ultimately you all agree on 99% of things, but you're just disagreeing on who's leading the damn party.
All right.
That's the thing that's always troubled me is it, and maybe it's, the practical approach that I tend to take to a lot of things, where I just see the simplisticness of a lot of stuff, and I don't, sometimes it's a detriment, sometimes it's it's not, and so I boil it down to the simplest thing a lot of times, and sometimes that gets me into trouble, and but I think in this case it works. Why? Why don't you just do what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the final analysis, we can, people can go tit for tat all day on who didn't do what or who should have done what and whatever else. But my bottom line as a voter is, look, I believe in the values that this party espouses and promotes. I want to see this party prevail in terms of leadership and government in this state. So this stuff about, who's on what committee and even to some degree who's leading the party, it's inside baseball, man.
Yeah.
Let's get to the main thing. The main thing is the Democratic Party has got to be viable and strong, well-funded, well-structured, well-resourced so that it can win. How do we achieve that? And if we can't achieve that, then all this inside baseball stuff doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Zero.
You're right. I mean, the average person does not care. They just want a functioning state party. And if you can't hold elections within the state party, then what the hell are we going to trust you to give us somebody that can run other things in the state? Why? Why would we do this? All right. Let's slide out. We come back. We're going to have Jeanice Warden-Washington with us, and Jeanice is the Chief Consultant Assembly Committee on Higher Education for California State Assembly. And so, we've gone to California. We've gone to California to find the folks that we need here, and to give us some education on some education. So we'll be back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment.
Welcome back to Alabama Politics This Week. David Person, Josh Moon, and that pretty lady you see there on the screen, if you are watching, is Jeanice Warden-Washington. She is someone I have known for many years, since she was a student at our alma mater, Oakwood University here in Huntsville. Jeanice is the Chief Consultant for the Assembly Committee on Higher Education for the California State Assembly. That's a mouthful. Jeanice, thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
So help us out here with a few things. We wanted to have you on because we believe that some of the things that are happening in California are going to have national impact, including here in Alabama. That's why we wanted to talk with you. But let's first just give us kind of a little bit of an explanation of what it is you do as the chief consultant for the Committee on Higher Education there at the California Assembly.
Certainly. It's an honor to serve, and I will say my disclaimer, I'm here because I'm so thankful to partner with I like to say Sir David and Sir Josh on this podcast. So
I will forever call him Sir David from this point forward, okay?
And you're forever Sir Josh as well. So when we get into the discussion, I'll be talking based on my own knowledge, but not representing the California State Legislature. But that being said, my day-to-day that pays the bills, serving as a chief consultant, very rewarding, honor to serve. One of many responsibilities that I have, I'm one of very few in the entire legislature, both houses, and California is a full-time legislature. One session is 2 years. In fact, we just came back from summer recess. Summer recess was a month, which gave everybody a chance to just take a deep breath because it's a very active state. You can imagine, fourth largest economy in the world, lots of moving pieces consistently. But that being said, I'm one of very few people in both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, who actually is the expert in higher education policy. And every day I'm learning and growing as well. But I'm one of few who actually, when the bills are introduced, anything and everything dealing with higher education, I'm reading every single bill, assigning the different bills to the team here in the Higher Education Committee for who will analyze which one, but as chief consultant, monitoring all of the moving pieces of the higher education related policies. And then many times rewriting those bills so that what becomes law is a good law with as hopefully no unintended consequences or the least amount of unintended consequences. Keeping members aware, legislators aware of the different issues that are facing higher education in the state and beyond, because as the saying goes, what California does in many situations, other states will emulate. Not always, but in many cases. And keeping them aware of the different challenges that are happening within higher education. And again, back to the bills themselves, the pieces of legislation, oftentimes members will introduce a piece of legislation and they think it's doing one thing, but then when I'm reading it and dissecting it, it many times is the antithesis of what they think the bill is doing as is in print. So that's where I mentioned I'm sometimes rewriting their bills or coming up with a great amount of amendments to get a bill to be more balanced. I'm also meeting with the members, the stakeholder groups, students, faculty, staff. We even deal with bargaining issues that affect California. And just for a scope of reference, California is home to the largest higher education network, if you will, in the nation, arguably the world, with over 100 community colleges, over 20 California state universities, 10 University of California system, and over 100 independent institutions that are nonprofit, and over 1,000 for-profit institutions. And I have oversight of all of that. And it's never a dull moment of members introducing legislation to create what they think is a new change or to have caveats to existing law. And this committee is one that usually has a high volume of bills every single year. So like I say, never a dull moment.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, even more of a mouthful than
I'm
your title.
tired just listening to you describe it. Honestly, I got to take a nap from just listening to you describe what you do.
Every day is a different day. Sometimes I come in thinking I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then it ends up being A, B, and C, sprinkled with Q, back to T, and maybe I have to jump to W. So you have to be flexible and adaptable.
So a quick follow-up, is that a partisan position or nonpartisan?
Great question. Technically, I, in the committee side of things, can be mostly nonpartisan. Now, the Speaker of the Assembly hires all chief consultants. California is very much a Democrat run house or legislature. There's a supermajority of Democrats. However, when we look at the policies, fortunately, I'm able to really hone in on the policies and the politics. Yes, they are part of policymaking, but fortunately, they're not the driving force in most cases of legislation and when I'm working on amendments. So thankfully, we think of ourselves as nonpartisan because we work just as hard regardless of if the author of a bill is on the blue side of the aisle or the red side of the aisle. And in some years, we've had independents in office in California. So whether they're peace and justice, libertarian, we work equally hard for everybody because we're caring for the policies and what will affect students, faculty, staff, and everything, as I mentioned, under the umbrella of higher education.
Got it. Thank you for that
Absolutely.
clarification, Jeanice. The first reason we wanted to have you on is because, as everyone knows, the Trump administration accused the University of California in LA, which is known as UCLA, of anti-Semitism and yanked over $550 million funding from UCLA and also suspended National Science Foundation funding. They want the Trump administration wants UCLA to pay about $1 billion, and I guess what would be considered fines in order to
or bribes.
Well, you and I would say bribes for sure.
Extortion money. Yeah.
To undo the freeze on the NSF funding and to restore the $550 million. And they also want UCLA to release admissions data, which I think is very chilling. That's something else that they want, another concession that they want. So I know that there's been some movement related to this action by the Trump administration. Can you give us an update on that?
Sure, absolutely. And as I have found in the 7+ months of the current 47th administration for the United States, there's been so many threats that happen and then subsequent lawsuits and then subsequent rulings. And then the Supreme Court of the United States, or SCOTUS, will weigh in. Right now, they're on hiatus until October. So we know they're going to be back in session to the Supreme Court shortly. In this case, what you have given as a summary, Sir David, is 1,000% accurate of what's been going on. I will note that it's not just UCLA that the Trump administration wants to have up to 6 years worth of admissions data. They want that for every college and university, which is far reaching. Universities across the nation will submit their data that basically just gives the breakdown of ethnicity of who has been enrolled. And one of the many tasks that the former United States Department of Education would have was to be able to collect that data, give reports and whatnot, and then from there have a report that could be a database to gather that information. However, what we're finding is that thereafter, the 47th administration is after so much more. They're not saying it, but they're really trying to target other things. And so they want more than just ethnicity data of who's been enrolled. They want gender and all of those different things for every single institution that reports this information. And so instead of just being year by year, they want 6 years. So they want to go back. And I truly believe, again, this is based on my research, not on behalf of the committee I work for or the state of California, but I truly believe that that's because they're still trying to come under attack campuses that do have an inclusive environment where you might have same-sex students, you might have trans students. They're wanting that data, and somehow we don't know exactly what they're going to do with it. So not just UCLA, but all campuses. And so that being said, the NSF, they had the National Science Foundation, which is one that awards, grants and funding to countless researchers. And as a side, the University of California system arguably is one of the most revered research-based universities in the world. And UCLA, in part, being one of the premier of all of the UC campuses, as well as University of California, Berkeley, and a couple other ones. But in this case, UCLA. And it just seemed arbitrarily that they automatically just cut all of the funding. And what happened then in that case was that the federal judge, after going through all this back and forth, a federal judge just on last week on the 12th, so last Tuesday, then ordered the National Science Foundation, or NSF, to restore the hundreds of millions of dollars in federal research grants they had cut to the University of California, and in this case, specifically UCLA. Ironically, when this happened and they said, we're just going to take your funding, they didn't actually give a real in-depth, detailed analysis as to why.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we found out was the 47th administration, in my humble opinion, had the nerve to say, well, we have the authority to pull all these funds, and we're doing it because we don't feel that you've done enough to protect students in the wake of last October when they had the different, somewhat peaceful and sometimes not peaceful protests on the different campuses across the nation. And they're veiling it. They tried to veil it that this was, because they didn't feel that UCLA had a strong enough anti-Semitism anti-Semitism practice to protect students. And again, punitive from October. And mind you, we all know that was before the 47th administration took guard. And so it's interesting that they're looking back at things that they weren't even around for, but then trying to make it punitive for the various campuses. But again, like I said, fortunately, last Tuesday, the U.S. District Judge concluded that NSF violated they overreached, they violated their rules and the protections of what should have been in place, and the money has been restored, at least as of now. Because as we know, there's a lot of back and forth ping pong going on in tennis
Right.
and anything that requires a moving eye. But as of now, the money was reinstated, and the researchers are doing their work and keep continuing to conduct their research, which is amazing.
Yeah. So I have one follow-up question, and then Josh is going to jump in. Here in Alabama, you talked about what you think the secret agenda is, or the underlying agenda is, which is to scrutinize and target universities and higher education institutions that have been very sensitive to diversity issues. Alabama has more HBCUs in it than I think any state in the nation. What do you think the impact is going to be on HBCUs with this particular focus of the Trump administration?
That is a great question. I haven't dug my heels into doing any type of research, but based on what we've witnessed in the last 7+ months since Inauguration Day, the 47th administration is single-handedly dismantling higher education as a whole. And people are concerned about certain elements of education. Initially, there had been comments made that, well, I'm not going to touch, HBCUs, and I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. But we've already seen the handwriting on the wall, if you will, where the foreshadowing is there. And I truly believe that at some point, we will then eventually see the attack of HBCUs, not necessarily so overtly, because he's trying to then be able to say that he's doing things for people of color, which I don't necessarily agree with, because he's already started making conversation and threats that institutions that have what's designated as HSI, Hispanic-Serving Institutions. This is a federal designation, and any college or university in the nation who reaches a certain percentage of Spanish and Hispanic students, and it's a certain threshold, and if a certain percentage of their population meet that definition, they receive federal funding. And he's already threatened to remove some of that funding because he says it's quote unquote not equitable. So he's saying that about campuses with HSI designations, but somewhat now a little bit silent about HBCUs. And so I wouldn't be shocked if somewhere down the line, he does start attacking them in different ways, or overt, kind of clandestine way of eliminating some of them little by little. And then we look up and we're like, what just happened? Because we do know that there are many that prior to the Biden administration, and I believe some of it started with the Obama administration, and actually, I take that back. It started in the Biden administration. There were so many that were about to kind of die, and they would have to be closed. But then there was the rescue plan, and so many thousands and millions of dollars that were put into HBCUs to kind of help resurrect some of them, because so many people realized the purpose and the history as to why we have them. But I could see how he would be able to, under the radar, start trying to close some down or come up with some reason as to why they're not fit to be open. And I think only time will tell. I hope that doesn't happen, because we do know, like I said, there's a unique role that I would contend every HBCU plays. Now, as a whole, does that segment, I'm just calling them a whole segment, of the 80 plus HBCUs, is there work to be done? I would say yes. Are some of the smaller ones maybe needing to refocus their mission? I would say yes. But until we know what that looks like, who knows what the 47th administration is going to do. And I will say real quickly, going back to the UC system, just to give another scale, the UC system generates $82 billion in the economy, in America's economy, not just California, but in the nation, $82 billion with a B. And it supports over 500,000 jobs across California and the nation. And it's producing annually around 1,500 and is over close to 14,000 active patents. And so that's just a scope of just the importance of the UC system and why it's just challenging as to what was happening with UCLA. And what we always say is what goes with one, we could see it happening in the trickle down effect with the other UC campuses. So just wanted to put that there too as a just a scope of the UC in and of itself.
Sure.
But yes, I'm concerned about the HBCUs.
Yeah, but are white people getting an advantage out there? Because really, that's what's most important. Because we listen, we've had a hard time. My people have had historically, we've been so troubled and downtrodden that we just can't seem to catch a break. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Let me say, first of all, that I'm so envious whenever we get somebody from a blue state on, because, to hear the things that they're doing to counteract some of the stuff, the idiocy it's really nice. It's really nice to hear people fighting for the rights of people, for an expansion of services, for, to make sure there's more inclusivity, all of those things. It's so nice. So in that regard, moving just a little bit away from your main focus every day, because one of the big things, obviously, now that everybody's talking about is the redistricting proposal. If you wouldn't mind, people have heard about it, and I think there's one idea outside of California of what this is. It's just simply, Gavin Newsom is going to come in and redistrict the entire state. Listen, I love Gavin Newsom, and his social media stuff is so awesome, but that's not what's really happening there, right? Yeah. Could you kind of explain in I guess in layman's terms, even what the proposal is in response to what they're doing in Texas, which is illegal and atrocious, and they're not even trying to hide the fact that they're cheating. So what are they doing in California and in response to that?
Sure. Great question, Sir Josh. And yes, in part, we know that this is a direct response to what's happening in the administration in Texas. And in fact, I believe today, under duress of the Democratic members who fled, they were brought in under, I don't want to say house arrest, but they were escorted by Texas police, and they're on the floor as we speak. And the vote is expected to take place at some point today. We will see what happens. They've already said that if it passes, which it's expected to do, they will sue. So this is going to be a long-term process in Texas as well. California, the governor here, yes, and you can definitely say that this is a direct response to what's happening in Texas, because if 5 seats are removed in Texas, then his thought is, okay, well, then let's get 5 more seats in California. And what is happening is that instead of California currently has a redistricting commission. And that commission is made up of nonpartisan people who are educated in the process, but not legislative members. Because even when I'm doing analyses, I have to do my very best to not have a bias. But we're human, and we all can have different biases, even as experts. And so this commission, they are known experts in understanding, mapping and all of that. Yeah. But they are a commission. Legislative input and political input is not supposed to be involved. And every 10 years, we go through a redistricting process. It's a process that is open to the public, and they're able to weigh in, and they're a part of it every step of the way. So this proposal will definitely take away all of that transparency that typically happens from that perspective with the redistricting commission. And instead, with an emergency proposal, they're going to vote on these proposals that were just introduced coming right back from summer recess tomorrow on the floor. Today's Wednesday, so tomorrow on the floor. And so we have an Assembly Constitutional Amendment, and it's number 8, so ACA 8, which is the part of the proposal that will be put on the ballot for the people of California to vote on. And normally when you have a ballot measure that's based on legislation to then go on the ballot for a general election, normally that process takes well over a year, and then it's on the ballot. Presumably it would have been on next year's ballot. But they have what's known as an urgency clause so that this can be speed tracked. And the idea is that the people of California would vote on this in November of this year to decide if they want to change these districts. And they're looking at 5 different districts that are pretty solid red districts now that potentially would then be reconfigured to be heavily favored for a Democrat. And then there's a counterpart of that proposal, and the two of them are linked. So both have to be passed and signed into law for them to go into effect, and that's Senate Bill 280. But in layman's terms, he's wanting to restructure some of the districts that are heavily favored for Republicans to counteract Texas so that then California presumably could have 5 more seats in Congress. Right. And just as a scope of things, ironically, just today there was a poll that was released. In full disclosure, it's a poll that is commonly used by the governor. I haven't seen other polling just yet, but the proposal so far is backed by 57% of California voters and opposed by 35%. And this is interesting because, as you know, California is a heavily Democrat state, but in the past election, there were many more pockets where people voted red. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I already know of some other red-leaning states that have said, well, if California does this, then we're going to follow suit with Texas. So in my humble opinion, I don't even know if this exercise of, power is going to actually be utilized in a way that could work in the interest of this state. But he's all in. The members are excited about it. Many of them are, not all of them. I think what's interesting is that the same poll I referenced, 84% of California's Democratic voters support the redistricting plan, and 79% of the state's Republicans oppose it. And so, like I said, overall, there's a 57% support for this measure. Yeah. Here's what's interesting. We currently in California, the way it is aligned, there are 43 congressional seats that are held by Democrats currently and 9 held by Republicans for the state of California. With this proposal, it would change, and it could end up being a 48-5 advantage for Democrats. So it's going to be interesting to say what happens, but that's in part what they're trying to do. So kind of a response to what Texas is doing, but in a way where it still would go on the ballot, and that the people of this state could respond based on how they vote. So it's not just unilaterally doing it, saying this is what we're doing as a legislature and it's a done deal. The people still would have a say. It's just going to be a very fast process from now and when it gets on the ballot.
Yeah. It's I wanted people to understand that it was not simply what Texas was doing, which is just a complete and utter power grab and really trying to cheat during an election to help out a president who requested that they do so. Which I don't, it should not be a shock to anyone, given that, the guy doesn't follow any rules at all. He's a 34-time felon. And, this is what you expect from, felonious individuals. Honestly, this is the kind of activity that we expect of us. Let me ask you this. Gavin Newsom has gone on essentially a national tour over the last, and I'll say, full disclosure, he has been my choice to be the next president. I thought he should be the guy leading the ticket this time. I like Kamala Harris fine. I felt like Gavin Newsom, the way he goes about debating, the way he goes about challenging Trump directly, the way he is so eager to fight and argue with people, I just respond well to that. I don't know why. Maybe
I think I know why.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But what I wonder is how has this affected him among his home state folks? Is he more popular now? Is he less popular now? How is he received there?
That is a great question. I believe, based on just conversations I've had in my workplace in conversations I've had with friends and even just conversations that have started and people don't even know what I do for a living, it really has been a mixed bag of marbles. People who have followed the leadership and the different positions that the current governor has had from the time he was in San Francisco as attorney general and lieutenant governor in various capacities and different positions he's held. He at one point was so liberal. And in the last 2 years has kind of shifted a little bit. So he's more so in the middle of different things. And I know some people have said, well, what version are we going to get of him today? And at the same time, I've not seen any recent polls, but the last polls that I saw, which are dated several months, he did have a relatively high approval rating, relatively being, the air quotes, because oftentimes politicians don't traditionally have a high approval rating. So even if it's in the 20s, that's considered high. I don't remember what those exact numbers were, and I have not seen anything in the last, 6 months or so. But overall, I believe people are, for the most part, happy with the different things that have happened. Certainly 5 years ago, his approval ratings were well past, they were very, very high because of the response with the pandemic and with COVID and different things like that. And so he's one that does try to get into the trenches. He's you name it, he's everywhere. And like you said, he has been doing a tour even outside of the state. That action, for some people have said, well, are you coming back to California? You're still the governor of this state. So like I said, it has been a mixed bag of marbles, but I haven't heard anyone directly complain that the work of this state has not been done. And so overall, with everything that he's been doing, I believe that the approval rating is still relatively at a decent number. I just don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah. Dave, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Miss Jeanice?
I don't want to impose any more on my friend's time. I think
I know. I was going to get her. I was going to let her get out of here because I think honestly, it's been a really, really fascinating look at a lot of different topics. And we really do appreciate you coming on. I mean, I guess just lastly, before we let you go, back a little bit to the education aspect of this. Looking around, getting the feel of everybody, is it? Do people believe, that you talk to that run the universities that are in the assembly that are around? Do they ultimately believe that everything's probably going to be okay, or are they very fearful of, obviously there's always some fear. I mean, I've never met a more nervous group than university professors. I mean, they're just naturally nervous, and especially administration folks that are getting their money from someplace else. But at the same time, I just wonder if they ultimately think, look, we're the judges and the courts and stuff. We see how this is going. They're going to protect us. We're going to get our funding. This orange buffoon is not going to close down UCLA and these other places. Is that the general feeling, or is there legit fear?
There's legit fear, and the fear is based on, as we mentioned earlier in our discussion, so much of the back and forth, not even just specific to higher education, but other things we've seen where, there's a lawsuit and then a federal judge says, okay, no, you were in the wrong, we're going to overturn that. And then all of a sudden it goes to SCOTUS, or a federal judge says, okay, just kidding, we're going to shift jurisdictions. And now everything is, there's a lot of confusion because there's a lot of up, down, all in between, and really ultimately not knowing. What we have seen, and I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, at some point you all have talked about Project 2025. And what we're seeing from day one, the ink, the confetti on the streets, the empty streets on his inauguration day hadn't even been swept up, and he was already instituting elements of Project 2025. And now 7 months in, well over 60+% has been done. And when you look at elements of Project 2025, it really, I'm paraphrasing, is to dismantle higher education. He, to me, is legitimately following Hitler's playbook. And what did Hitler do? Hitler took away all of the elements of people being able to be educated. And so there is that fear because people who know the history, whether it's taking, a federal grant for this, or this or that. He's trying to insert himself on everything, anything higher education, and ultimately trying to narrow it down so that people who look like me, people who look like so many other people, may not be able to have an education.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what people are concerned about. And instead of having a space where people can have discourse and learn and grow, and it's not about what side of the aisle you are on with higher education, it's about learning, growth, experience, and figuring out what you're going to do to give back to society with your occupation. Somehow, I believe in the administration's mind, they want to make it seem as if it's a place where people go and they're brainwashed and all of a sudden they're Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case. And so there is free discourse and people should be able to have that opportunity, but it seems like that's not what they want. And there is that fear because people are naturally afraid of the unknown. And in this case, there's so much more unknown because in the beginning, people just assumed it would be kind of what we experienced when the president was in the 45th administration. But this is so much more than what we encountered with when he was 45. And that's the unknown and the fear that's there.
Yeah.
And also in wake of AI, there's an uncertainty too, because I've talked with faculty and administrators who have a genuine fear that AI, artificial intelligence, is going to replace them in the classroom. So we're dealing with that on top of everything else on the federal perspective. And then, of course, annihilation of the United States Department of Education, which is there to really help enforce the fact that regardless of gender, ethnicity, creed, religion, religious affiliation, all of the protected classes, that students would have a safe space, because in the past, they didn't have a safe space. But now with the dismantling of the Department of Education, the lens has switched, and it really does feel as if they're only trying to protect what they want to protect, which in this case tends to be, I would say your religious Christian nationalist in many cases who are white people. And that's what makes it challenging. And that's why the fear is there, because at least in California, all of our institutions as a whole have an all-time high of diversity. Some of these campuses that in prior years didn't have many representation of Latinx, Black, Asian Pacific Islander, different ethnicities, now on their own accord, they earned their spot at these institutions. Now, all of a sudden, where we have so much more diversity is now when it's being targeted. And I think it's going to be sad. And that's why there's so much fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we all know that we need to shut these universities down because facts are liberally biased. And, the more facts you put out there, the more liberals you create. So listen, Madam Jeanice, I've been trying to think of a good thing since you keep calling us sir. Madam Jeanice, we really do appreciate you coming and spending an extended period of time and explaining so many different things. And it's really been an awesome time. And really look forward to you getting back in the heat at some point in Northwest Alabama. Until then, just continue to keep up the good work out there.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to partner with both of you all. And let's keep that line of communication open.
We'll do it.
We will, Jeanice.
Yes,
we
sir.
will.
All right, we're going to slide out. We'll come back. We'll wrap this thing up in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a moment. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Thanks to our friends over at Wind Creek Entertainment for their sponsorship, and the folks at SPLC, and to Jeanice for coming on and spending some time with us. That was
that's
really
my friend, man. She's appreciate her doing that. She's as I think I said earlier in introducing her, I watched her from afar as a student at Oakwood University. Sharp young woman, man, and she provided us with some good insight.
Yeah, it's great. And really appreciate you setting her up with us. Cause we love to have smart people on as much as possible and to give us a look at what's taking place around everywhere, and because it all relates. And what's taking place in California is certainly going to impact us in the state of Alabama going forward, and what's being done to colleges and stuff. We know well. There's some folks at colleges around this state that know well what the Trump administration is trying to do in strong arming them as they try to strong arm everybody. And we'll get to that in just a minute. There was one thing I wanted to bring up. And there's very rarely, as people may know, I have lots of opinions. But occasionally there are things that I don't know where to land necessarily. I have an idea about it. This is one. And it is the decision by I think there's a national movement, but more focused on Alabama. Arthur Orr is currently pushing a bill that would restrict SNAP beneficiaries, folks that get food stamps, basically, from being able to use that money to purchase sodas and sugary snacks, little Debbie's, cookies, that sort of thing, and things that are deemed unhealthy for children. And I think that there is a list somewhere of those things. And I've looked at the list, one of the lists that I've seen, and I here's my problem. Okay, here's my problem. I don't drink Cokes. I don't let my daughter drink Cokes and stuff. I mean, if once she gets to be of a certain age, then she wants to try some Cokes and stuff, I don't think a Coke every now and then is going to kill anybody. I don't.
Correct.
But I don't think it's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think a lot of those desserts, the way that they're packaged with the high sugar content, the high preservative contents, all those things, I don't think those are good for you. I think that the study after study after study has proven that those things are fairly harmful to you if consumed over a period of time. And so I say, okay, well, we don't allow people, and no one argues this, we don't allow people to purchase cigarettes or alcohol with this money because those things are deemed harmful. So why would we allow our tax dollars to go towards harming other people? So why would we do this? And I'll be honest. I've heard some of the arguments against it. That you're limiting the choices. You're taking this. You're making these folks do this. I get it. I mean, nobody's saying that they can't buy it with their own money. I'm just saying, I don't necessarily know I know it's a Republican idea. I just don't know that it's all that bad.
Well, the first problem I have with it, honestly, is that I find it amazingly hypocritical that the same people who were willing to castigate Michelle Obama for promoting health and with diets in schools and lunch menus and all of that, and with the garden that she had planted at the White House, the same people all of a sudden now want to be advocates for healthy eating and living. I find that profoundly hypocritical. The same people who always talk about how they don't want government in their private business. The same people now all of a sudden are trying to tell other people what they can or how they can purchase certain kinds of foods or restrict what kinds of foods that they can purchase or not purchase.
Yeah.
I think that's hypocritical.
Yes.
And I also think that there's something very punitive and I'm going to say discriminatory in targeting people because they receive government money to control them in terms of what they can purchase and what they can't purchase. I just wanted to say, like you, I don't think that stuff is healthy. And by and large, I don't eat it myself.
Yeah.
Or drink it myself.
Yeah,
I get all of that.
Yeah.
But I think there's something punitive, unreasonably punitive, hypocritical, and discriminatory about what Arthur Orr is trying to do.
All right, I'm going to say two things. One is, the first one is, one of my only pushbacks is, I just think that limiting it not only, I understand what you're saying about there being a punitive aspect, and that's certainly true. I think that there's a lot of glee among Republicans to do this, to think that they're in some way punishing, they're limiting the choices of these folks to go out and do that. I think that there's some self-satisfaction involved in that, and I think it's disgusting, and I don't care for that at all. That said, I can also see from some of those folks who I believe are genuine about this, that say not only will this help them, that they shouldn't be doing this in the long run, it's going to also help them in terms of their health care, that it will not be as costly later on because of the problems that come from ingesting these things, whether it be diabetes or, just in general unhealthiness because of weight issues and things like that. I think that that's a genuine thing to say. Okay. I do. I mean, I think that those things have been proven over time to cause a variety of health issues if consumed. And here's the other problem that I have. Here's the other problem that I have with it is that those things are so damn cheap. Okay. Those things are so cheap and that they are so attractive for folks to take and consume. And that, I think, is another big issue that we have here. I think there ought to, honestly, I think there ought to be a tax on those things. I think there ought to be a soda tax. I think Obama, proposed a soda tax at one point, and some others have proposed a soda tax. I think there ought to be a tax on some of these, some of the other foods that we ingest that have been proven to cause health issues. I think there ought to be a tax devoted to paying for health care for the American people. But I'll tell you the pushback. My pushback on this is this.
Okay.
Is this my last my pushback on them and agreeing with you is we've got one of the highest rates of infant mortality in the country. We've got one of the worst child health care systems in the country. We have no expansion of Medicaid to help poor people at all. We have no education of people about nutrition and what they should eat and what they shouldn't eat and all that. We have none of the things that would indicate that you give a shit outside of this one thing towards educating children and helping to make poor children healthier and doing better things in their lives. You had nothing out there that says this thing. Okay. And a matter of fact, we have shirked our responsibility at a state level on doing the local stuff that we used to do in terms of making kids healthy and in terms of propping up community centers and sports youth teams and all of these different things that we used to get kids outside and play. And, everybody complains about it in their living room on Facebook at night, but nobody's actually funding anything from the state level, comparatively speaking. There are some funds. I don't want to misconstrue that. Comparatively speaking to years past, we're not doing the same level of stuff. All right. And I think if you don't care about it that much, then stop trying to pretend that you do with this one thing so you can punish the people on Snap.
And see, that's really where I was going. If you're going to really be serious about it, because the people that are on Snap probably don't even, I don't know what the numbers are, but I can't believe that it represents even 30% of the state, I would imagine. Or maybe 25% or something like that. But whatever the number is, we know it's not the majority of people in the state. So, if you really want to solve the problems, the health problems, like you said, Josh, we should be expanding Medicaid. We should be doing other things to encourage preventative health care. And if we're going to target people for soda consumption, sugar consumption, then we ought to be targeting everybody because obesity is a statewide problem. Heart conditions are a statewide problem.
Yeah. I'll tell you what you need to tax.
So we ought to be targeting
you need to tax some of those fried fish places.
Just targeting this relatively small group of people as though they're the problem and they're the solution. Well, that's just a lie. They're not. It's everybody. It's across the state. So that's what we ought to be doing. If they were talking about a soda tax, a sugar tax, dude, I'm all with that. Yeah. Tax it. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Disincentivize us from over consuming. And you know what else? Pork. You know what else? Fried foods. There are a lot of things. If we want to start talking about the consumption of unhealthy foods, too much consumption of red meat, I mean, we can go down the line. There's a lot of stuff that contributes to heart disease and cancer and other problems. It's not just sodas and sweets. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. So if we're going to be serious about it, let's be serious about all of it.
Yeah, that's what we really I looked it up. It's a little less than 15% of the state we're on.
Like that's going to solve the problem. for the state of Alabama?
Well, no, and I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I don't think it's going to solve the problem. But I do agree that this is at least one aspect I think should be done. Okay, that's just my opinion. I think that this is one aspect of a broader plan that should be implemented, because I do think that it would positively affect the children of poor families. I do think so. I think it would be, but you're right. What there should be is a tax on these things that have been deemed bad, and that tax money should not go to the government. That tax money should be then applied to fruits and vegetables and healthy items that you can purchase to make them cheaper. All right, to make it cheaper to purchase those things, because right now, let me tell you something: eating good is expensive as hell, man. It is.
Right.
I mean, vegetables and fruits and stuff are far more expensive than Little Debbie's and whatever little drinks and stuff there are out there. And it is, it's a problem. I mean, that is a huge problem.
One of my indulgences, I'll confess to it. One of my indulgences is, I like tangerine juice. I know a lot of people drink orange juice, but I actually like the juice of the tangerine. And when I buy bottles of tangerine juice and I look at the prices, it's freaking expensive. Yeah, now, I'm willing to do it because that's what I want to do. And I have, I'm able to do it, so I do it. But quite honestly, I'd rather be paying, and when you compare it, I think it's overpriced. Maybe, but regardless, what you're saying is right. Let's reduce the price of things that are healthy. Yeah. Let's make healthy eating, more accessible to the poor and really for all of us. And I'm all for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look back at our history in the country, and I mean, we're far fatter and unhealthier now than we ever have been. And we shouldn't be. We're far more advanced health-wise. We should not be. And it's because of the way that we've been able to, to receive our food, basically. And, the people have figured out that, that you can consolidate and ship this food from a variety of locations. And, it's just, I mean, when did we start getting, tomatoes from Mexico, and, and you can have them year round, you can have things year round, and, and all with there's a lot of conveniences in that, but there's also a lot of preservatives and a lot of salt and a lot of, there's a whole, like I'm started this a while back. I don't eat anything fried. I mean, occasionally I might, dip into an appetizer if one hits the table and there's, some cheese sticks or something like that. I may have one or two or something but it's maybe once every other month I'll have something fried. I red meat about once a month. I don't eat anything that's been frozen if I can help it. And because I can tell, like if you go to one of the chain restaurants that's got the refrigerated truck sitting outside delivering all their food, all right, and you eat there, versus going to a local place that is cooking your stuff fresh and stuff. The feeling I got to noticing the feeling that I had leaving those places were two totally different things. I did not have that same sort of bloated sort of, just didn't feel good. Even no matter if I didn't really overeat, you just didn't feel good. And so I've tried to cut that out because I knew that it could not be healthy for me. I still eat some bad stuff every now and then, but I try my best to avoid whatever I can. And it's less about, having great scores on the blood work and things like that versus how it makes me feel. Those things cause me heartburn and stomach issues and other things. And I didn't want to have them anymore. They wasn't worth it to me.
Right.
And so, so I think though that in doing that, I've realized how complicated and expensive it can be to do those things, especially if you are a struggling family out there. I mean, you could eat 7 meals sometimes for what it would take you to eat one healthy meal. And we've got to fix that.
Shouldn't be
as well.
Shouldn't be. That's right.
All right, let's move on. Let's get to our right-wing nut, because our right-wing nut is Donald Trump, as mentioned earlier. And he's the right-wing nut. I mean, we probably should just put his face on the little, if we ever come up with like a little logo for the right-wing nut, he should be the face of it. But this, and I try to stay away from him, but occasionally it's just so hard to get past some of the dumb things that he says. And this past week, as he's talking about going after the Smithsonian and some of the other museums around the country, because, you know, they're doing a check to make sure that their historical displays and exhibits line up with the Trump's vision of history, you know,
of America.
Yeah, right.
And history.
Yeah, I thought it was just, you know, his only real history book he's ever read is Mein Kampf, so I didn't know what they were talking about. But you know, he says in a post, so he had to think about it, then write it down,
and then type it. Yeah.
And somebody had to check it to make sure it was spelled appropriately, and then send out that they were too focused on the bad parts of slavery, on how bad slavery was.
That is one of the most asinine things that he said, and he said a lot of asinine things since he's been in public office. But anybody, you know what's interesting is, and I think you were right to call him the right-wing nut of the week for that, because it is asinine. You know, the very idea that somebody would try to soft pedal the impact of slavery and what slavery did is just asinine. But having said that, that line of thinking is not unique to Trump, and it predates him. Quick story. The Daughters of the Confederacy, and you may even remember this as a child who grew up in Decatur, the Daughters of the Confederacy used to visit the Decatur city schools.
Yes.
I don't know how often and what the situation was, but they used to do this. My first wife, in her first teaching job here in Alabama, she taught in one of the Decatur elementary schools. And she came home one day mad as hell, Josh, just furious, because one of the Daughters of the Confederacy had come in to talk to her class, and began to tell this class, which was, I think, predominantly black children, if I'm not mistaken, that they should have been glad that their ancestors were enslaved, because it rescued them from that horrible Africa and the tribalism there. And it also brought them to Christianity so they would come to know Jesus.
Oh, I remember these lessons. Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
You know, we had books, we had history books that taught us, that most of the slaves were treated very well. That's what I remember being taught this.
So she was feeding them a bunch of lies because, first of all, Africa as a continent was filled with kingdoms. And and when I say kingdoms, I mean, I'm talking about ancient African kingdoms, you know, that predated the slave trade and that existed during the slave trade. And all you got to do is do a little bit of historical and archaeological research, and you find that some of these civilizations were extremely advanced. In fact, some of them were more advanced than the European civilizations. But don't take my word for it. Do your own research. In addition to that, Christianity was in Africa before it was in Europe. Hello, the New Testament says that Jesus Christ himself as a child went to Egypt as a baby. You know, and let's not even get into the fact that the Jewish faith also was on the African continent prior to the spread of Judaism beyond into the state of into other parts of the world, you know, and that's documented in the Old Testament. So you know, this whole idea of slavery being some kind of thing that rescued black people and civilized them and made them Christians, it's all bunk. And then you get to the other bunk that you talked about, Josh, which is that slavery wasn't that bad. Oh, really? Yeah, do a little historical research and talk to me about the horrific beatings, the separations of families, the fact that they weren't allowed to read, the fact that people were, as punishment, they were, or even just as a part of subjugation, they were raped and maimed. Come on, give me a break. It was the most, in fact, historical records show that the African slave trade was the most inhumane form of slavery that existed ever.
Yeah.
It was more inhumane than what the Romans did. It was more inhumane than what, African tribes did to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So please don't give me that. Do your research.
No, well, come on. I mean, most of those people didn't even know that Egypt was in Africa. Come on. So look,
Right.
You're talking to people that are still today trying to put up Confederate monuments. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're still trying to put up Confederate monuments. They've got this complete rewrite of what took place there and what happened, and it's astonishing to me how well some of this has stuck with people. And again, it goes back to. I wish there was another word than privileged, because I think that word has been stolen from it has been taken from its meaning and its factual basis and its true basis and been kind of tarnished by the right a little bit. But it's from privileged white people who have, they're or victim, that love to play the victim of whatever, and
right.
they've been doing this now for I don't know how many years, and it is consistently sickening to me to watch these folks do this stuff and to complain about how the black people just can't get over slavery, just can't get over it, and and to never. I'm like, oh, I really are. So what part of it should they? Well, I mean, it's been 200 years. I said, oh, it's been 200 years. Well, so then they had every right that you did as soon as. They were free. They could do whatever they want. Oh, really? Could they hold jobs? Could they hold office? Could they be elected to places? Could they drink from the same damn water fountain as white people?
Right.
When did that come about? Well, I mean, that was 1965. I said, well, what was it really? 1965? Or was that when the law was passed? And then we had a slow progression up until about the 80s where things probably did get better. And we had integration and a number of different things that actually did make things better for a number of black citizens in this country. And then ever since then, we've been slowly and steadily tearing them to pieces.
Yeah, there's opposition to it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Right. And so, I mean, this rewrite of just basic fact and doing it with their chest out is, I mean, what that is to me. I think Bill Britt, worked with it at APR, said they are rarely right, but also never unsure of themselves. And that is to me what describes MAGA more than anything else, is these people who love to play the victim and pretend that somebody has been taking things from them other than the white dudes at the top who've been taking things from them. Right, and pretend that because somebody had dared to come along and say, hey, you need to treat everybody fairly, that somehow that was an affront to them, and unfair to them, and that simply because somebody said, hey, all that stuff that happened for 250 years or 400 years over here to this group of people probably disenfranchised them to a large degree and put them behind an 8-ball all the time throughout their lives, and have led to a lot of the societal ills because we refuse to address these things or to correct them. And by doing so, they're so, what? No, you must be kidding me. And Donald Trump is the perfect embodiment of that shit. Okay. Who was born halfway between third and home as it was, and loves to act as though he hit the triple. And it galls me to no end to watch these people grovel and whine and act like the snowflakes that they proclaim other people to be. And it just pisses me off. And this is another thing that has pissed me off. So I tried my best not to cuss very much this week.
You did a fairly good job too. I got to give you credit. You did a fairly good job.
Your pastor would be okay with me, I think. So.
Right.
All right. Let's get ourselves out of here. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.